From the very first notes of One Life in Fully Cooley's opening, to Mikado's monologue about the mundane to kick off to Rarara, the captivating silence of Sunny Boy's abstractions, or the sad reminiscence of Wonder Egg Priority, there's no shortage of stories which deal with the idea of wasted youth. A young character whose life has hardly even begun, and yet they already feel as if they wasted, or have truly and physically given up, the greatest gift. Whether it be manic pixie nightmares, headless riders, the scorn of God, or the horror of death's pull, what remedies the situation for these half-brooding main characters is usually some kind of grand chance, in many cases someone literally riding in to change their life, and although they have to hit the follow-through, swing the bat if you will, the instance that begins their growth is normally the kind of chance we could never experience in real life. There are no pink-haired aliens on Vespas or headless riders on stylish motorcycles, no going adrift, and no warriors of arrows. And so, while these shows all create powerful cases for what it truly means to live life, there's always something slightly out of place, some knowledge in the back of our minds that we could never replicate this blueprint for success, and oftentimes even the explicit knowledge that we shouldn't desire to in the first place. But in this mix, there are occasionally stories which dare to build their excitement on the kinds of things that we would never imagine. Not in the sense that their ideas are wild and insane, developed by some Kojima madman who just binge drank 10 5-hour energies, but that they're not typically what we think of as exciting and indicative of the concept of wasted youth. They just feel like someone who really loved something about life and wrote a story surrounding it. One of those is A Place Further Than the Universe, which never once steps outside of reality's bounds, except for the occasional creative liberties to make viewing an easier experience or accentuate the point. We start with Mari Tamaki, usually called Kimari, a second-year student who begins to mourn her slowly dying youth once it smacks her in the face, quite literally. Years ago, she promised herself in writing to make the most of it, but instead she sleeps in and lazes around for all of her days. Her family just assumes they'll have to wake her up on any weekend day before she sleeps it all away. Set on changing this after coming face to face with her forgotten dreams, she plans to skip school, changes in the station bathroom, and boards a train in the opposite direction as usual, allowing life to take her in its random grip. But that plan never goes further than the opposite platform, and she ends up at school anyway. It feels so simple to plan. Do everything the exact same as you normally would, but with one or two key differences. A bit more things in your bag, a new route, a different train, one simple decision that could change your life, or even if it doesn't, at least satiate the desire that somewhere out there people are living more fully than you, prove that if nothing else you can step in the direction they sprint. We can say how easy it is in simple words all day, we can feel it so much, and yet we resist it. What is holding us back? Well, a lot is. When Kimari ends up back at school, she begins listing off a bunch of excuses because, well, the train could crash, or a plane could fall, something could always go wrong, summed up in her friend Megami's response that one of the most dichotomous things about being human is that we rely on convenient truths, little excuses for every situation. We have grand logical processes going on within us at all times, and yet we often make decisions based around one or two factors to call on or off an entire exercise, rather than considering them in full. Deep down, we either want to or don't want to do something in complex ways we fail to understand, and so we draw a line in the sand over one aspect to make things easier. This sounds very depressing, and it somewhat is, but it is also just how a complex world maintains any sense of efficiency that is unfortunately required. But of course, this works against our sense of adventure, because more can always go wrong with the unknown than the known. Sure, a meteor could fall at any time either way. A storm or a careening car could end it all in any instance, but one of those paths puts you in the danger zone for more time. One's uncertainty provides less ability for you to avoid these things. For example, like the dangerous intersections we all probably know near us because we see them likely every day. But we don't know them when we travel. The closest I've ever come to dying was because of this. A sudden snowstorm in an unfamiliar area meant that when I was cresting the hills, I had no idea what lay on the other side as I did back home. I had no way of knowing that even a measly 10 miles per hour was too fast for the probably mile-long slope on the other side. In half an hour later when I arrived, I was still very much shaking. Adventure is inherently a risk, and society and our roles in it are all about mitigating risk. We are trained away from adventure. And there is a good reason for this. I mean, societies across the globe didn't just decide life should be boring. They started because they knew a boring life was a safe one. An aversion to risk, acting only on careful planning against the unknown and towards refining the known even further, is how we got to live in the spaces we do today. We live in a world full of things we have to do rather than ones we want to do, because having to do things is conversely easier than wanting to do things. When you're forced to work, even though no part of your body or mind wants to, you do it anyway. It requires almost no motivation to, as anyone with a 6 a.m. alarm can attest to through such genuine despair each morning. We push through this feeling, sometimes for 40 full years of our life. But then we also find ourselves thinking, why didn't I do any of those things I wanted to when we do find some spare time? Almost every rare slow night of my life is wasted doing about 1 hour worth of fun across the entire night, even if I'm doing literally nothing else. I'll play a game I love, but think the whole time about how I'm not into it 100%, and so it feels like a waste, or how I could have been doing something new, but I went back to one of the ones I knew instead. Because those things we want to do need motivation, something unfortunately lacking after all the have-tos as the system backfires. Anything we want to do can always wait for a better tomorrow where we appreciate those things more, if such a thing ever comes. I think the guardrails of society are good and necessary, but it is undeniable that they have grown beyond such good intentions in many cases. They led to a world which is built on the feeling of wasted youth, preparation for the future over living in the moment. It is also because our own fear of something more complicated than just simple risk is pushing us towards these excuses. Physical risks are devastating, and there is no understating just how much they can impact our lives. A random accident can completely alter and, of course, even end a life in an instant. But we also all know that the fears of the abstract, of the others, and their judgments of the future, of all these things run abound in the mind to cause havoc, never having a definitive end as physical fears do. If you're afraid of heights, you can avoid them for the most part. If you break a bone, it heals. But you can't avoid your own mind. It doesn't heal over time itself naturally. It requires work, it requires constant effort and pushing and all these things. These abstract fears are with us at all times. When Tamaki is close to adventure but still considering backing out, she sums this up best with the line, because there is a very specific pain that comes with failing at these things, at these fears. If we flounder at a sport or a craft, it comes down to training and physicality. We just haven't gotten our muscles used to what they have to do yet, from the fine stroke of a brush to the intricate motion of a pitch. We know that there is a remedy called practice, and that can be done quietly and alone for the most part, at least while we prepare to show this vulnerable aspect of ourselves to the world in a better and more professional form. But what safe practice is there for living life to the fullest? What tutorial video is there to watch along with to live? When we fail at living life, we've faced what feels like a definitive answer, that we're not cut out for living life itself. It's the underlying aspect of why we do anything, so finding ourselves incapable of it hurts much more than anything else. We never want to confirm that we have not yet learned to live. As such, we often find it better to wish that we had, rather than to risk understanding why we never did. And there's a reason for this. These grand dreams sustain us in what's often a world without satisfaction. In our minds, there's a world where we are fulfilled, and trying to merge it with reality might mean breaking it down, providing proof that, as of yet, it couldn't be real. To maintain the dreams which keep us going, we avoid ever acting on them. We keep them inside and away from harm, dreams of adventure never allowed to venture out. This is probably the brand of wasted youth that we're familiar with, at least if popular media has anything to say about it. And I know for me, to this day where I'm coming too close to double the age of some of these characters for comfort, it's a feeling I still know all too well. It's a feeling strong enough that multiple hour-long video essays about it have yet to fix it. That almost 2 years of my life at this point have yet to fix it. Writing words to impact other people whenever they can't see you across time and space is much easier than listening to the own advice that you wrote. That is the pain of a wasted youth, even for the one who speaks about solving it so constantly. But this isn't all wasted youth can be. The reason Tamaki gets a shot at adventure is because of Shirase Kobuchizawa, better known to her classmates as the mocking nickname Antarctica. Where the former lacks all motivation to do anything with her time, the latter has nothing but working multiple jobs to fund one dream she's held for years, of course, to reach Antarctica. Her mother was part of a civilian expedition there years before, and her death during one of these put the entire program on hold for 3 years now. However, with their return, Shirase gets her chance at a chance once more. She's not guaranteed, as the adults aren't too keen on taking the teenage child of someone they cared for and lost with them. But either way, an adventure to Antarctica is certainly, well, an adventure. It requires getting to the port where the ship will set sail, working aboard it as you travel, even through the waves that feel like the wrath of some kind of god, before you get to smash through the ice to finally reach the destination, a place where no human lives permanently, and witness sights forbidden to anyone even close to a city, and further ones you can't get anywhere but here. It is endlessly unique. As her mother's book titles it, it is a place further than the universe. This is exactly the kind of thing that Kimari wants to achieve before entrance exams claim the majority of her life to avoid the feeling of wasted youth. But we see instantly that the cost of avoiding it may be the very same thing. Shirase is a workaholic outcast with nothing to call her own except this goal. She doesn't even have one kind of bad friend like Kimari, and everyone who joins her in a quest eventually leaves, claiming it impossible for a teenager to get aboard such a dangerous expedition. Every action she takes, every relationship she forms, is centered around this trip. Take away this goal, and is there even a person left underneath? Sure, such a trip is a way to feel fulfilled in life, but it's stolen the past 3 years of it to do so. By the time entrance exams hit, she'll have never done any of the small things that we often see as indicative of youth itself, from convenience store snacks to sloppy karaoke. I certainly wasted my youth in the traditional sense, but I also wouldn't outright trade all the 2-mile walks to the chain store for energy drinks and snacks for one great trip either. Shirase is doing this because it's as close to a need that a want can be. Only by making it to the place where her mother died will she ever feel closure, hoping to put an end to the emotional drift that she's felt since the day that bad news arrived. There's not a single bone in her body screaming to adventure for its own sake, for some idea of making the most out of it before time dictates responsibility. It's just an emotional duty. She has exactly what Tamaki wants, but getting there means giving up everything else that makes her want it to begin with, leaving a childhood that's still, at best, half complete. We see this explained more in Yuzuki Shiraishi, who's a shift on Shirase's character, never getting to do any of the things people typically do in their younger years, but with Tamaki's motivation of wanting to do the things she hasn't because of fulfillment, not because of family or duty. Yuzuki is a child celebrity of sorts, beginning her acting career at the young age of 5, with a mother manager who puts that career above anything else. The girl is 15 and already being told, "You have to do it, it's your job," as if she's a 30-year-old beaten down by 8 to 12 years of servitude. She meets the other characters specifically because she doesn't want to go to Antarctica, as she's supposed to go along with the expedition and make a series of video reports along the way. Overhearing them discussing their goal and its struggles, though, she approaches them to ask for someone to take her place so she can live the kind of life that Kimari wants to leave behind for months at a time. If she doesn't go on this trip, it would be the first time she's had some free time in some time, as she's not filming anything else currently. She's been on sets and released albums, has fans who want her autograph, everything that one normally dreams of, but the cost of this was a normal life. With the schedule of an adult, or maybe even worse, she's never had time to sit around at home and make a dream diary or grab snacks after school with friends or even make friends. She gets one chance to, asking bluntly for their friendship, and while they accept it, it's in part because she's famous, and after so many times of her being unable to hang out, they leave their group chat behind. She doesn't even have people to text, let alone call friends. What's seen as special to the other girls is mundane for her, and she's willing to trade exactly what they want for exactly what they seek to discard. Her wasted youth was living another's fulfilled youth. For one more layer of complexity, there's also Hinata Miyake, who functions as a shift on Kimari, as they clearly share the desire to do something big before responsibility sets in, but with more of Shirase's motivation as well, as she wants to do so to shove it in the faces of the people who left her behind. This split makes it more complicated. Due to a lot of friction between her and the people who should have been her friends, she dropped out of school and is now wanting to pass college entrance exams like, or actually better than anyone else. A hard worker who was abandoned by people who presumably slacked off more, she wants to score above anyone else to show those kinds of people exactly how badly they messed up their future and how wrong they were to slander someone who was just trying their best, as well as going on this adventure to say that she's living a fine, full life, succeeding without them in every way. It's one part wanting to not waste her youth, and one part wanting to yell at the kinds of people who do. What we see in these four girls are four takes on wasted youth, a matrix of reasons and motivations, all mixed but also distinct. There's the usual life, the want for usual life, and then closure and revenge alike. Of course, this raises the question, what then even is wasted youth? What defines a life which is fulfilled versus one which isn't, if they can all embody the same concept in widely different ways, and then go to try and solve it all with the same exact trip? There is something really interesting to look at to begin bridging this mental gap. One of the things that Yuzuki specifically mentions missing about not having a typical life is that it seems an odd thing to desire to feud with the people who are supposed to be closest to you. But it's entirely true that something negative in the moment like this is indicative of the stuff that makes fulfilled youth. To know someone deeply is to have those things that you'll fight about, that you care and know enough to do so for. We can see this negative inclusion in desires of all three of the others as well, as Kimari feels the most alive of her entire life when they're running down the streets of an unknown city trying not to get caught, the pinnacle of which to her is getting physically injured along the way. Shirase is constantly working and trying to show up all the people who told her she couldn't make it, and Hinata is basically chasing this goal out of spite in her own way, and is still able to absolutely lose it at the idea of her former friends. These aren't inherently harmful things. There's nothing saying they'll ruin your life just by existing, but they are all typically quite unhelpful at the very least. I don't think anyone wants to run themselves to exhaustion or work themselves to exhaustion or fight with their friends on the regular. I've recognized this kind of aspect of myself a lot. I wake up at 6 a.m. for work during the week and 8 a.m. on the weekends to work on videos. I'm a cranky, awful person if I don't sleep enough because of this, as I didn't the night before recording this, in fact, and yet all the experiences I desire go against this very defining factor of my life. I want to be up until 3 a.m. with people I just met again, talking about anything and everything as the sun comes up, to look back on so fondly more than once in my life, even if it made the entire next day a painful drag. In retrospect, these important times were irresponsible, stupid, and sometimes even harmful, but they are what defines my perceived lacking thus far. The distinction between fulfillment and unfulfillment is not common and uncommon. As we saw with their distinct lives yet same feeling, it can't be, but rather the distinction is in comfortable versus uncomfortable. The reason for this is that comfort alone is against a fulfilled life. The change and growth, new experiences which define moments of fulfillment, are uncomfortable and tiresome things and efforts, and these are at the heart of adventure. Adventure requires being uncomfortable. To see this, let's first examine further what the mundane aspects of our lives are that we seek to escape. What we consider wasted youth are usually comfortable, very inherently positive things. On the surface, going down the street after school to spend what little you have on junk food looks silly and wasteful from a future perspective, and of course, I'd love to have the probably hundreds I spent on mall vending machine energy drinks back. But being able to do something like that so regularly is a mark that I had something worth making recurring in my life. At the time, it was living like royalty. Having a shrine you always go to with a friend to talk after school is a mark that something was good enough, you were okay with doing it again and again and again. Being able to just send a text and repeat a certain set of plans for the night is a sign of good closeness. There's a logic behind mundanity, whether it's the physicality of being friends with someone close like a neighbor, the emotional comfort of someone you know has your back every time, and everything in between. This just means that we found something valuable enough to hold on to and hold on to close. If people are willing to dedicate the same time and space to you again and again, that means you are mutually valuable to each other, and that's a fantastic thing. What we're looking back on is only negative because now we have a much different perspective than we did then. In the moment, it was probably exactly what we wanted and what we chased with our limited responsibility and limited knowledge. And we're coming at it from the mindset of someone with the stability and money and general ability to do much more grand things, which our younger selves most likely probably didn't have. What's accessible to us now simply wasn't even imaginable to us then. The only problem with this is that it's not in a vacuum. We are changing creatures in a changing world, and with comfort easily comes stagnation along the path of least resistance. Exhausted from any responsibility, we often seek the same comfort again and again, even if we begin to feel exhaustion from it as well, because it's so much easier than anything else from its repetition. It becomes less enjoyable and more reliant. We see this with Kimari and her friend Megami's slowly devolving relationship. As Kimari develops friendships with this new group, she has less and less time to habitually spend with Megami, which leaves the other feeling a lot less valuable in life. Not because her friend is leaving her behind and ignoring her like a cheesier show might have gone for, but because she realized that she was holding her friend back all this time. Look at what Kimari can do on her own. With her friend now outside of her grasp and living a valuable life, Megami realizes that her only source of value was in Kimari's reliance, from helping her potentially cut class to coming to her for advice in every situation. Acting as a sort of big sister from the moment they met, Megami felt like she had a positive reason to be, and then seeing that it was, or at least became the opposite, crumbles the mundanity which had developed from mutual benefit to mutual harm. Kimari also feels awful from their friendship, as the reliance she showcases feels like a drag on someone she should be thankful for. Part of why she seeks out an adventure is to finally do something without forcing another to guide her. One feels awful for being that guidance, and the other feels awful for taking it without question. Over time, what was once a sign of positivity in life became stagnant, and in stagnation, a human being will never find value. A positive thing unmaintained, used only for comfort, will circle around to become discomfort, as we're different people changed by a fluid world, yet stuck in the same old situations. At the very least, we age, a change which can never be avoided, and which we must adapt to. And I don't think there's a single one of us who's entirely 100% happy with every aspect of who we are. Even if it's in a small way, I think we all crave some kind of change. So when we come face to face with how little we've done to change, smacked in the face like Kimari with her diary, we find a lot of internal discomfort. We get spurred on to change in an endless cycle. Comfort craving beings who can't find permanent value in comfort. And so, right before Kimari leaves for Antarctica, Megami breaks up their friendship, admitting all of this and more, that she was the one spreading the awful rumors about them, hoping that Kimari would give up on her silly new goal. Clinging on turned her into someone awful, and she seeks to detach and start anew. So, when we see how what was once good can so easily become bad under our noses, why do we have to wait for it to become unhealthy for us to be spurred on for change most times? Why don't we recognize it sooner and adapt? Needing a push like this is why we all feel some kind of longing for a past we never had, and it is a feeling that we can never avoid. We will always need this obvious push because why else would we act against our own comfort? We have to remember that these mundane things often started because they were quite beneficial, even the ones related to work like Shirase and Yuzuki. They were missing out on one thing, but in exchange for value still, a worthwhile career at a young age and a pile of money to spend as they wish. Even spending 40 years working a job we hate provides so much, whether it's morally correct to tie them all to employment or not. And so the downsides have to become fairly detrimental themselves to get us to finally have a logical reason to go against what we define as comfort or mundane. It takes a whole hell of a lot to change the things we found so good or beneficial or necessary that we allow them to hold down our entire lives, as it should. If it was easy to change our daily lives, then we would have never had valuable things to begin with in them. We struggle to change because we found important things and don't want them to change. This is why adventure is defined around these often negative beginning moments. They are the coercion that breaks our stagnation and forces us to change. Almost every adventure begins from an unideal situation, a painful feeling, something we are seeking to avoid, or mountains and mountains of effort. These experiences are inherently driven by anxiety and fear, unideal for us because they are a large enough change that we never considered it as part of our mundanity before. An unideal is the perfect way to describe the expedition the girls do get to go on as their solution, as Yuzuki agrees to go for work, only if all four of them do. They showed her what real friendship could be like, and so the aspect of adventure to her is the simple moments of connecting with other people, which are exceptionally stressed in a journey like this. While in the past, the civilian expeditions were a decently funded and well-focused time, now it's much less so. It's in constant peril of being called off after 3 years of planning, and everyone is pitching in to make up for the lack of staff. The girls expect to arrive on the ship and see containers getting put into the hold by cranes, and what they find instead is everyone rushing to secure supplies on foot before they set sail and carrying them on board to exhaustion before they've even begun the journey. Most of the crew are hardly making anything from the expedition too, if not outright losing something like a relationship back home because they went. And this is all to get to a place so harsh and disconnected that no human beings can exist there permanently. It's only ever a temporary affair. The entire thing is funded by blood, sweat, and tears, driven forward by their worry and anxiety on anything from money to safety, sustained by an unyielding effort for years on end. The entire adventure, from the destination to the means of making it happen, is the furthest thing from comfort possible. And that's of course what makes it such a perfect adventure. It's tough and grueling, and it forces them away, literally away, from everything they've ever known. It's escaping to an entirely different world on the same planet, seeking out the freezing cold to be certain that at some point in our lives we were ever warm. As dissatisfaction with a lack of change grew, it eventually led to the largest one possible. It led to the ability to do these things that feel so insane to choose to do over comfortable life, because comfortable life had become anything but. The unknown had become the only way to find real pleasure. But in this unideal state that adventure is, we will of course find a lot of doubt, another reason why we seek out anything but for most of our lives. The girls knew what to expect in many ways, and they knew it couldn't be easy, of course. It would be cold and lonely, and there's no going back early. You can only pack so much, and it won't be relaxing. But there are many things they were unprepared for, like just how violent the waters get when you're passing through unblocked current, and just how much the wind bites right through even protective gear. They're already exhausted from getting in shape to manage the basics, a simple requirement of the trip when they get seasick out of their minds just as the worst of the waves are kicking in. This leads to Yuzuki pondering the situation and saying,
なんていうか、生き物として生命力が全然違うっていうか。
in reference to the other members of the expedition who appear to be just fine and constantly prevent them from making amateur mistakes. This statement is everything about those fears which prevent us from changing we discussed earlier. It's getting right into the thick of adventure and then thinking that there is something inherent about you which can't adapt to this. That you'll reach out for what you desire, only to find you could never get close enough to grasp it, and fall into a comfort which you know is nothing more than coping with the world you really didn't want. That you'll face the unknown and it will spit you back out like it was nothing. This arises because the first steps of adventure are the picturesque ones, the running away down the streets of a new city, happy to be exerting oneself, even happy to be hurting oneself in service of something new. It's temporary, with the sore muscles the next day serving as a happy reminder that you took those first steps. It is in your body undeniable that you did, and you rest to be able to do so again more. It's getting on a plane to somewhere new like the main characters of a movie, exploring as happy tourists while you wait for the next stages of grand adventure. But that moment of pain we once enjoyed in contrast to the norm grows into a constant pain, a struggle to keep going in dark cabins with rocking waves rather than the bright lights and chilly rushing air of a city run. It is a struggle and always will be a struggle the more we get into an adventure like this because it is new and unprepared for. No matter how much we feel we did, we can never know all we need to be ready for something new. We can never be prepared for the exhaustion it requires to build up as we commit to it, no longer receiving the rest of the happy first steps which have turned into a sprint. It's taking medicine to prevent seasickness once and not knowing you have to do so again, and then it might even not work once things get to their worst. The only way we learn some important things is by doing them, feeling how awful they are and trying to prevent them, jumping right into the thick of it and seeing how we manage. The feeling of adventure drives us to leap, and that leap will always be into the terrifying, unknown things, because that is exactly why we seek them out. The only way we overcome it is by persisting, doing it again and again and again until the fear and anxiety which define adventure fade out. The bright city streets that begin things are about effort, but the dark cabin is about effort and confidence and persistence all at once. It's having the weight of months of effort on your shoulders rather than just one moment of wonder or one sentence in a diary. There's more behind it and more to feel like you lost. And this is important. The ability to fail is what proves its value, what makes it a want to and not a have to. Failing once you've started for real is terrifying because you have to come to terms with the fact that you chose to be cold, that you left somewhere warm for this. Kimari stresses this with the line,
選択肢はずっとあったよ。でも選んだんだよ、ここ。
when Shirase says that they have no choice but to stick it out for this reason. The things we can choose to give up on are the harder ones. We've all given up on things we had to do and we get over it. Looking at it as a have to is seeing it as detached from us, so there's much less pain. Quitting a job doesn't define who you are, it's just one thing that you are not. But when it's a desire that we failed on, that we spent on and exerted over and we fail, that's a pain that stings forever. That's finding out that those things did define you just as you learn that you can't have them, at least not right now. That there's more work and more effort and more pain that needs to go into them first. It's nothing more than confirmation that you don't just want to change, you have to change. And so the only way to make it happen is to experience it, to live with it and gain the skills we need to perform what we desire. We spend time with it and grow accustomed to it, and eventually we find a comfort in it that makes it easy. A comfort in it. Yes, to succeed at adventure is to kill the thing which makes it adventure in the first place. This is true of all things we know. The friendships we now accept as a regular occurrence were once a step into the unknown. The relationships we cherish were once filled with anxiety and nervous desire, and the places we call home were once unfamiliar and terrifying. There's a reason a child can look at the world with such wonder. The entire thing is just an exploration waiting to occur, but we all know what it is already. Since fulfilling experiences depend on these emotions and feelings we often consider negative but which spur us forward, then it's undeniable that as we spend more and more time in these fulfilling experiences without any change, they will lose that fundamental aspect of themselves. They can still be positive, but they can't be adventurous, and after too much time, they can become negative, just the same as the things we left for them. We see this as the girls' adventure in Antarctica wraps up, and they begin to easily tease each other about the daily duties and different aspects of the work they got to do. They no longer question what they have to do and when, they're no longer thrown off by how the individuals there act in regards to certain things. They know you have to eat fast or it gets cold, and that frozen food will hardly ever thaw. It's simply become a routine for them, still exciting in its ways of course, but it's a comfort they've sunk into enough that when it draws to a close, Kimari throws out the suggestion that they stay. It's so valuable that she wants to hold it for longer. But it's obvious that can't happen for many reasons. They have lives to get back to, whether that's shooting a new drama, or entrance exams, or old friends. The harshest truth of great experiences is that they require mundane ones to ever hold any value. Not just in the sense of perspective that we already covered, how one person's wasted youth is another's fulfillment, but also in the stability required to adventure in the first place. Every voyage has the point it launches from, full of supplies and everything needed to make it work. It has years behind it, preparations to ensure that all the discomfort can be accounted for and managed so that one doesn't easily give up. It needs the others and systems of support who are undergoing the same thing themselves. Without all of this, one can find these times, of course. I've had plenty of nights where strangers and random places become the fuel of life. But they were all fleeting, haphazard moments which fled just as quickly as they arrived, so many let's exchange numbers that turned into so few texts. They were moments of adventure, but not an adventure in themselves. And while it aided that feeling of satisfaction I wanted, they also opened the door for me to see just how much was waiting and how utterly unprepared for it I was. To have those experiences powerful enough to force us over the hump past the screaming 60 degrees, we need a lot of support and unyielding dedication that only comes with stability. The reason all those nights ended, and though more came from them directly, is because everyone involved in them was returning to their own comfort, to their own stability, to launch their own voyages, just as everyone on the girls' voyage will, seeking to save up for another, to mend their relationships, or to secure their love. They'll go home, take care of what they left behind, they'll grow comfortable in it once more. When it grows stale, they'll burst out with all that pent-up energy once again. Adventure doesn't mean leaving behind the past, even if it does require coming to terms with it, though. When Megami tried to break up, Kimari caught her, said she refused, and ran off to her adventure before the other one could say anything more against it. Throughout the entire trip, she's sending texts back to minimal response, refusing to make the same kind of clean break, because it doesn't need to be. We don't have to kill the past to find something new, because that only leaves us with what we find, making it easier for that new thing to become just as much of a crutch as the old one. We need those old things to keep these new ones special, and these special things to keep the old ones special. Adventure doesn't mean moving on from everything we knew, because we'll come back to it with fresh eyes, ready to see what makes it valuable again as someone kind of new. Adventure is a sort of test. We will always be dissatisfied with stagnation, but what is special enough to become mundane and still be worthwhile? But our relationships with places and things, more so than people, often do need a definitive end if we want them to remain special, as things and places don't really change as much as people. They can't keep themselves fresh like we do. There's one scene that expresses this necessity of ending the best, and it's on their return from Antarctica. Since they went in summer, the sun never set enough for them to see the aurora, one of the big things on Kimari's bucket list, and a sure desire of anyone who makes it there. This seems to be a part of what drives her will to stay, wanting to tick off every single box on that list and craft the perfect adventure. But to have it be perfect is silly because it's already unideal. They do finally see the aurora on the boat, just as they're set to film their final report though. At first they try to catch it on the camera, but when they fail to, Kimari simply says, as she seemed to not care at all. This sight was not for an audience, it was for her and her friends. They lay down instead, committing to witness this moment exactly as that. One small period of time which is uncaptured, lost to time save for the unreliable storage of our own memory. It was, in some way, a failure of part of what they set out to do. But adventure itself is just a failure in a kind of way. It's a moment of messing up that forces change. It's failing in daily life enough that you desire something different. The most beautiful, picturesque moment of this entire journey is one which is only a few minutes, never extending beyond these very limited bounds on purpose. It's there and then it's gone, only relived if one goes on the whole adventure once more, complete with all its efforts. It stresses what's really important, the effort to get there, not where there actually was. And that definitive end, allowing something to exist and then end before it ever becomes overly comfortable, that is the true mark of a fulfilling adventure. It is a temporary thing, defined only by having a daily life to escape, and so it must always end or it would never exist in the first place. It's a line you've heard 1,000 times before in all the songs played at the emotional end of all things. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. What we're left with is an eternal cycle. Allowing important things to define our lives, they grow stale and unfulfilling to a breaking point. We burst forth with the energy required to do something new and terrifying, which itself either becomes a new normal or refreshes us to deal with the one we left behind, repeating over and over. This is what growth is. It's not a smooth path upwards, but a rough and jagged mountain with some gentle periods laying the groundwork, but steep cliffs and grand valleys spread all across it. It is not an easy path to follow, but it is the only one forward.
それを知るためにも足を動かし続けよう。
All we can do is keep moving, pressing along until we find the next worthwhile adventure, allowing us to have the perspective to appreciate what we decided was so important to hold on to before that, judging what we do and don't want to keep, and starting a new or adjusted normal from anxious turmoil. We determine what's worth becoming mundane, what can survive becoming mundane, and what can't, and what needs to stay as part of a journey. Sometimes the most valuable nights of our lives are the ones that we can never relive. They're built on the unknown, and so how could we ever really hold on to them to begin with? The best thing we can do is to let them remain in the hazy corners of our mind, proving our dissatisfaction so that we can continue to change for the better in realistic ways. And so there is no such thing as wasted youth. There is no denying that our youth is a distinct period ever since schooling became mandatory, this fleeting time where we have lower responsibilities, but no perspective to know how important that is, and even if we do, so few means to act upon that knowledge. We will always look back on it with regret because it is something lost and never regained, and we will always know that there are things much more accomplishable in that state than now. But that doesn't mean that anything within it is a waste. Having that feeling that it was a waste in some way means it was a success because we've grown as a person to desire new and scary things, that we are not stuck as what we once were. It becomes the fuel for us to change even further, becoming who we want to be from this fear and anxiety that provides so much energy just building up. It is one of the most important things that I've learned in my entire life, that fear is just your body telling you what is important enough to warrant your attention and your energy. When something makes you anxious, there's a reason. It's because it's distinct from the things we know in a very, very important way. This doesn't mean that it's always positive, but regrets are formed when these things show us the way and then we deny them. So be uncomfortable, follow your fears. And if the thing you find is special enough, then one day it can survive not being special at all. And that sounds like a pretty special thing indeed. And that will wrap it up for this one. If you can take those last few lines, there's a speech in a series I really love, a more recent one, more recent being like the past few years, that really inspired how that was phrased and worded. So if you know what that is, if you think you guess what that is, let me know down below, because I'd be interested to see if people can pick up on those more subtle inspirations that go into things, but that's completely off topic from this one. There's a siren you're hearing in the background now, that's fun. But Yeah, if you watched the Power of a Stupid Game video, you know that this kind of ties into that a lot, especially the thing about fear and that idea of wasted youth or this time that's really passing us by. I think kind of stuck in both of those. So A Place Further in the Universe was something that just really hit me at that time where I was feeling, I think, exactly what I was supposed to be feeling already, and it just kind of reinforced. And it was one of the easiest things I've been able to write about in a while, where my notes basically went right into the outline and then easily into a script in maybe just a day. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. At only 13 episodes. There's moments in there that are going to hit you like a truck, and it's fantastic for that. But anyway, I rambled a lot, so important links in the pinned comment. Discord and Patreon, where these lovely people above me help me keep doing stupid rambles that I say I'm not going to do and then do anyway. But a big thank you to everyone for spending some time with me here today, and I hope I'll see you again soon.